The government will be giving those people in this scheme £600,000 compensation at least. So it will mean a lot because, remember, those who've been convicted couldn't, up until now, access compensation schemes. So it will mean that things are sped up for them, and it will mean, of course, that they are pardoned publicly.
The government's announced new legislation will be introduced to exonerate the victims of the post office scandal. It means more than 700 convicted sub-postmasters and mistresses who were convicted will be cleared and will receive compensation. Here's Rishi Sunak announcing the plan at Prime Minister's Question Time.
Mr. Speaker, this is one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in our nation's history. People who worked hard to serve their communities had their lives and their reputations destroyed through absolutely no fault of their own. The victims must get justice and compensation. Sir Win Williams' inquiry is undertaking crucial work to expose what went wrong, and we've paid almost £150 million in compensation to over 2,500 victims. But today I can announce that we will introduce new primary legislation to make sure that those convicted as a result of the Horizon scandal are swiftly exonerated and compensated. We will also introduce a new upfront payment of £75,000 for the vital GLO group of postmasters. And can I thank my honourable friend, the member for Thirsk and Malton, for all his hard work on this issue. He will set out more details to the House shortly. We will make sure that the truth comes to light, we right the wrongs of the past, and the victims get the justice they deserve.
Rishi Sunak earlier. Now, the former Director of Public Prosecutions, Ken McDonald, told Jane Garvey and Fee Glover earlier he had serious concerns about the new legislation.
The problem with the Act of Parliament is that, firstly, it's constitutionally very awkward, and secondly, it will mean, I think, that some people who are in fact guilty will be exonerated. That's the price the government is prepared to pay, and that's really, I think, a political judgment as much as anything else.
So that's Ken McDonald. Here with me, Kate McCann, our political editor at Times Radio. Hello, Kate.
Hello.
So what are your big thoughts on this? Government rushing to put a plan together. It has put a plan together under a good deal of pressure.
Yeah, and this is a plan to ensure that those postmasters who were convicted are now exonerated en masse. So it's an act of Parliament. We expect to see that legislation in the House of Commons within the next couple of weeks. And I don't expect that there will be very much opposition, if any, to it in the Commons from other parties. There is a general sense among MPs that this is the right way forward. The government had meetings with senior judges about doing it, and that's because it's not a simple thing for Parliament to overrule the courts. It's a really fundamental part of the UK justice system and of politics, actually, that the courts are independent of Parliament and those two things don't cross. So in doing this, the government has had to ask the judges for advice and essentially say, look, in this extreme circumstance, we think it's the right way. Are you happy with that? Now, the judges have said that they are, and that means ultimately that this will go ahead. It will probably take until the end of the year. And by that time, the government will be giving those people in this scheme £600,000 compensation at least. So it will mean a lot because, remember, those who've been convicted couldn't, up until now, access compensation schemes. So it will mean that things are sped up for them, and it will mean, of course, that they are pardoned publicly.
Right. Now, I'm guessing the judges may have taken, in some cases, a bit of persuasion, because we know there are prominent lawyers over these last days who have been, uneasy about using the law to override the court system.
Yeah, there are some people who say, well, look, it sets a precedent. It means that you could do this in future for other things that we may not all agree are exceptional or that need a public pardon in Parliament. I think the reality is that the fact that the government has chosen to go about it by consulting with judges shows that it would be unlikely to be used in any other kind of a way, a nefarious way, if you like, in the future. There's another problem, though, John, which is that some of those who were convicted, and, up to 700, remember, people were taken through this process. They feel that because the courts were where they were convicted in the beginning, they would like it to be the courts that exonerate them. So they may feel that they still want to pursue that avenue. There are also some complications for people who have been convicted and then gone to the appeal court and the appeal has been refused. What happens to them? The government is going to look carefully over the next couple of days about what happens in those specific cases.
What about that concern of the former DPP we heard there a moment ago about separating the many innocent from, no doubt, a limited limited number of people who may actually be guilty
Yeah.
as charged.
The government acknowledges that there are some people in this number who did defraud the post office and did deserve to be prosecuted for doing so. We don't have a set number for how many those people are, or what kind of money we're talking about that was involved. The government has a system it's going to use to ensure that they don't get access to compensation, which is that everybody in this scheme will have to sign a piece of paper essentially saying, I didn't do anything wrong, and I accept that if further evidence comes down the line later, then I can be prosecuted. And they are going to work out a way to ensure those people cannot access the compensation scheme.
All right. And just lastly, the timing of all of this. How much do we know?
Yeah, within weeks for the legislation to come before Parliament, we don't expect much opposition. So by the end of the year, all cases, the government says, will be exonerated, which means that they will then have access to at least £600,000 each in this compensation scheme. And there is another compensation scheme for others, not those who've been convicted, but those who led the charge and didn't go through the courts process. They will get a £75,000 payment up front. That's also part of the government announcement today.
And just, again, lastly, on the sort of the cruder politics of all of this, I mean, do MPs and ministers privately anticipate some winning and losing when it comes to public opinion, the court of public opinion? We heard earlier on the deputy chairman of the Conservative Party pointing the finger of blame across the House at Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrat leader. A moment later, there's the Prime Minister saying it's sad if this is politicised.
I think for the most part, in terms of these compensation payments, no, everybody will agree that this is the right course of action. But remember, there is an investigation, an inquiry ongoing, and that is designed to look into who is responsible here. And that's why in this conversation, you're not hearing people talking openly, in politics at least, about Fujitsu taking the blame, about them formally paying for some of this, and about some of those post office bosses. That's not because people don't care. It's not because politicians aren't thinking about it. It's because until that inquiry is finished and its conclusions have been reached and published, they are not able to talk in those terms. When that is finished, that will be the next stage of this, which is who is culpable and what should we be doing about it. And some of that will include, we expect, some financial penalties for companies like Fujitsu.
All right, Kate McCann, thank you. We'll talk again a bit later on, Kate.